Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Facebook Live broadcast. I'm Steve Altishan, Director of Client Partnerships here at Pacific Cascade Legal. And today I'm here with midlife dating and relationship coach Jonathon Aslay to talk about dating with confidence after going through a divorce and some tips for folks who may be hesitant about dating as a divorcee. So, Jonathon, before we kind of start into that, you want to talk a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got to be what you're doing?
Well, thank you so much, Stephen. I'm honored to be on. And I will just say nobody goes to college to become a dating and relationship coach, or maybe that's a new profession coming out. But um, after turning 40 and going through a divorce back in 2005, I found myself back in the dating marketplace. And there was this thing called internet dating where you just punch in exactly what you want and someone would magically appear. And I'd met someone, had a really great date, but something wasn't right. And then a few days later, I'd meet another person, have a great date, and something wasn't right. And in 1 year, I had over 100 internet first dates. And I realized that the something wasn't right was me. But so I just started to study about relationships around that time. And at the same time, I was connecting with women a lot of times not even for dates, just talking on the phone, sharing experiences. What was it like going through a divorce? And I realized I was forming bonds with women almost in a therapeutic sense. We were sharing our experiences. Well, what happened next, Steve, is women would reach out to me and say, "Hey, Jonathon, will you look at my dating profile and help me make it better?" Like I was developing friendships, it wasn't dating per se. And I would say, you need to change this, this, and this. And then a month later, I get a call. I've got this date with this guy. Will you read his dating profile and tell me what you think? And that's how my business was born, is was helping women improve their dating profiles and then give them perspective on men. And along the way, I began studying every book I could get my hands on relationships. I started to do therapy. I started to do personal development work, self-help and spiritual work. And then a few years later, I said, I could be a coach, like I could be a coach, like I was like, just throw up a website. And then I eventually became a coach. And here I am 15 years later.
I like that. I really like that. You sort of found yourself and what you want to do even later in life. I mean, that's what I kind of did too, and so I
Yeah.
really respect that. So obviously,
Yeah.
your your experience probably, maybe not, changed your perspective on what dating is and what relationships are.
Yeah.
So,
So,
and
oh,
oh,
go ahead. Go ahead.
no, go.
Well, what was interesting was I was a gigantic train wreck after my divorce because at the same time I was going through a divorce, I lost my high-end corporate job. And then the market crash of 2008 and 9, I got devastated. So my identity was completely shattered. And and quite frankly, online dating and talking to women was like a form of therapy for me. It was escape, it was a self-medication. And along the way, I was kind of reprogramming myself or reparenting myself along the way through these experiences. And so when I began, and just so you know, for your audience, I coach women on helping them understand men, particularly divorced men, because divorce is the unraveling of the tapestry of your life with another human being. And so I became acutely aware of the challenges men and women face going through divorce. And so I could basically, I'll be candid with you. I was warning women not to date me. Like that was my calling, was be careful of the guy who's really broken. And there's a lot of dysfunctionality that occurs when we go through a divorce, particularly here in the United States, because we have so many contentious divorces. It's adversarial. And that bleeds into how you date as well. So there's a lot of moving parts to this, but I wanted to point that part out to help your audience understand where my impetus was for helping.
Well, I love it. So I'm a little older than you,
Not
obviously.
by much, I guarantee you.
So dating isn't what it used to be, though. When I was dating, it was like standing around and waiting for someone to like you. So,
Yeah.
that didn't go very
Yeah,
far.
I remember that.
And but can you talk about some of the dynamics of, I guess I would call it modern dating?
Yeah, so what's interesting about, and by the way, I'm a baby boomer, just to give you some context, so I might look a little younger than you, but I bet we're about the same age. So much like you, it was a whole different environment. In fact, back in the 90s when I met my first wife, I've only had one wife, but bars and nightclubs where you met people, you met them dancing, you would meet them. I mean, some people would meet in college, some people would meet in church, some people would meet at work. Those were the predominant places from the 1960s till about the 1990s, was school, work, family, church, and bars were in there too. And then everything changed when the internet was birthed. And now 65% of all couples meet through an online connection. And all those other modalities are like less than 5% each. Whereas at one point, they were all like 20 or 30% each. So just to give you some context. And the the key factor in this is now we meet most often total strangers. See, when you and I were growing up, we like my ex-wife went to the high school next door to me. We had
Yeah,
friends that knew each other. We grew up in the same city. I mean, there were all these familiarities. Whereas today, when you're meeting a stranger, you don't know their backstory, particularly the divorced folks, because you don't know their backstory of that trauma they most likely experienced. And I think it's radically important to address the fact that divorce is an emotionally traumatic experience. It is, it can even be at the level of PTSD, type
yeah,
of experience. So there's a trauma that occurs. And so for those that are in the marketplace today, not only are we meeting strangers, but we don't know, please forgive my language, how messed up they are.
yeah. Oh, yeah. So, kind of like going forward after a divorce in the sense of your finances, your friends, your kind of building your life back together. A lot of our clients, are hesitant about where to start. And
Yeah.
so I'm assuming that that's a big step in going back to dating again. So what sort of advice would you start to give to someone who is hesitant or just afraid of dating after a divorce?
Yeah, so this is a great question. Where do I begin? And I think it really, I'm going to invite everybody to begin with know thyself. In other words, I believe that it's important to do the inner work, the healing, the personal development, self-help, spiritual, or even therapy before you put yourself out in the dating marketplace, number one, because whatever happened in the past will carry forward in the future. And most people naively date, well, if I meet the right person, it doesn't matter but our baggage travels with us. Our emotional baggage travels with us. So, number one, I would say know thyself and become self reflective and do some real deep healing as number one. Number two, I would recommend know what you want. And this is the tricky part because
Yep.
some people say, well, I don't want anything serious. Well, that's a dangerous approach to dating. I don't want anything serious because right now, hookups, friends with benefits, situationships, and casual relationships outnumber serious relationships. Most people find themselves in some sort of casual relationship that has no legs to it, and or one person wants serious and one person doesn't want serious. That's why it's casual. My coaching is based on life partnership based relationships. What I encourage is to have clarity. If you want a life partner, then you have to approach the process completely different. And let me say what that difference is: intentionality versus ambiguity. People today are dating because they just want companionship, connection, and sex without commitment. And because of that, that creates ambiguity because you don't know where someone stands. So these are just some of the factors I bring up in my conversations.
Wow. As you're talking about that, I thought to myself, like, if I was in front of you as a client, I'm going, well, hold it. Should I even talk? I was in a very serious relationship. It was a marriage. We had kids, maybe, and I even got divorced. So should I bring that stuff up? Should I dig up that past at least when I'm starting, or wait?
Well, here's the challenging part of that question. Your past gives you insight into your future, depending, and most importantly, have you healed from your past? So, from my vantage point, I wouldn't want to have physical attraction and chemistry with someone only to find out that they're stuck in the past. So,
Right.
I'm of the belief is you just get it all out as soon as possible. Now, every dating coach would say the opposite. No, don't treat it as an interview. Wait until you build up familiarity. Well, if every other dating coach was so right, why is the dating marketplace absolutely miserable? It is dysfunctional. It is chaotic because I'm here to encourage go deep as soon as possible and then build connection with someone versus the other way around. Because once you're hooked on someone, then you got to go on the ride and it will end eventually if you haven't healed your stuff.
I know a lot about healthy relationships
Yeah.
and the importance of healthy relationships, which, is kind of, I go, well, of course. But then I thought about that and I went, well, how do I know if I'm in a healthy relationship? Um, how can I tell? I mean, maybe the last one wasn't. And are there things I should watch out for, or prepare for?
So, the question is, what is a healthy relationship? I mean, just statistically speaking, if 50% of marriages end in divorce first time and second and third marriages end at an alarming rate of 65 to 75%, you can correct me if that's if that my anecdotal information is inaccurate. Well, then that must tell us some clues. You know what? People are good at this. So,
Yeah.
what's a healthy relationship? Well, in my mind, two people that are teammates with one another, they're partners with one another, they genuinely are attracted to each other, they're genuinely friends with one another, they can resolve conflicts relatively easily. It's not always I'm right, you're wrong, that sort of thing. That's to me the context of a healthy relationship, particularly the capacity to resolve differences with relative ease. Relationships that are contentious, relationships that are, the Gottmans talk about the four horsemen of the apocalypse, which is defensiveness, stonewalling, criticism, and contempt. If your relationship has that, then it's going to be a toxic relationship. So coming back to your question, how do you know you're in the right relationship? Because you feel good. And I don't mean the first, second, or third date. I mean 2 or 3 years in, you still feel good about this person you're with, and you both feel that way. That's usually a good sign.
I love that. Let's kind of go back to, kind of the physician know thyself one that you kind of started with, which was, get yourself squared away
Yeah.
and look at yourself and analyze yourself. And you used a term that I read, which, you know, you encourage the people, your client, to take ownership of what you said was their own weaknesses.
Yes.
And that's not an easy thing to do. Um, how do they go about that?
It's interesting. Chris Rock, the comedian, says that in dating, we show up as the ambassador of our best selves. Okay. And so that's oftentimes what you meet is the mask of another person, the ambassador of their best self. So when it comes to weaknesses, and I'll illustrate this in a moment, it's understanding maybe what triggers you. Maybe it's understanding that you've had traumatic childhood and there's residue from that childhood and it might show up in relationship. And what I'm really talking about is people who are self reflective, self introspective, self aware. And what I mean by weaknesses, let me give you an example. So I'm by the way, I'm in the dating marketplace like everyone else. Okay. I'm not happy about it. I was in love with someone, but she wasn't in love with me and she left. Um, and and I'm aware, oh, by the way, in the dating marketplace, a lot of women like to travel. That's their number, like they talk about travel, travel, travel. Well, I'm terrible at travel. I happen to know that I experience a tremendous amount of anxiety when I'm in a foreign country. I don't feel safe. I know myself. Now, do I go spastic and start acting like a tantrum little 2 year old when this happens? No, but I'm aware that it's a struggle for me. I know this about myself. So I'm very upfront. Look, if you need that masculine man to be in charge and make all the plans and all that, then I'm not your guy because I'm going to fail you. But that doesn't mean I'm not don't have the capacity to step up, but I know this part of myself. I know the weaknesses, I know my insecurities, I know my flaws. When we can become that introspective, then we can be, then, by the way, what I just shared with you was rather vulnerable. Like
Yeah.
it, and by the way, vulnerability builds intimacy with another person when you can actually open up and say, I'm scared. Okay. And that's know thyself in what I talk about.
Wow. The Are there ways to understand the other person? And like you said, you coach women mainly, and guys, we can be awful and do such stupid things.
No, no doubt.
How how can that be an effect, and how can you help your clients go through that? Because maybe we can't change some things, but that doesn't mean we can't try.
Well, I'm a believer we can grow. We can grow. I mean, to some degree, our base personality is set, but at the same time, I think we can grow past our, for lack of a better word, we'll call it limitations. Um, you know, One thing is I'm a big proponent of therapy, particularly or personal development, self-help, spiritual work. I put them all in the same category. I call it self-love, just like the book behind me. Um, One is to examine your relationship with your parents. I think it's critically important, or whoever your primary caretaker was in childhood, because it will have an effect on how you operate as an adult. Okay. And for those that had a severe traumatic childhood, then it requires even more healing. Those who had maybe a vanilla childhood, there's residue that you could have been picked on. Like I was bullied in school, that has an effect on who I am as a person. So, coming back to this context of know thyself. In addition, again, since we're talking about divorce, I think it's really important to heal from our past relationships. And sadly, many people, women in particular, but men as well, equally, is they're bitter and jaded about their past relationships. Well, that will bleed into every new relationship going forward because if you're carrying that residue. So, to understand yourself is to go back to childhood and identify what traumas you might have experienced and do some forgiveness and healing work. And the same holds true for past relationships and or marriages.
When you are talking to your clients,
Yeah.
and do they talk about, or is it on their minds, or do they want to mainly get married again or never get married again? Is that vision of getting married again, can it help, or can it hurt your dating relationship? Because it seems like that could go both ways.
This is a great question. And I think ultimately, I guess the point is, what's the purpose of a relationship? I think one must ask themselves, why are we doing this? I'm a believer that if you build connection with another human being, it really sucks to say, well, we've got a time limit on this, like, hey, we're just doing it casually and it will, like, because real trust is built through commitment. It's hard to build trust if you aren't committed, or at least committed to commitments. I'll even go that far. So real intimacy is built through the foundation of commitment. Now, does that mean you have to get married? Look, I struggle with this because I don't necessarily believe I want to have a relationship with the government, okay? Because that's what marriage is. It's a relationship with the government because they get to dictate how your life is when you decide to split up. Um, I'm a believer in spiritual marriages or some sort of covenant between two people that establishes strong commitment to one another. Um, but here's the thing, Steve, when a person goes in ambivalent about commitment, then they're going to be building a foundation. They're building a house on a very weak foundation.
Yeah.
And so I'm either like, look, in my mind, either shit or get off the pot. You're either in it for the long haul or not. Because, and by the way, plenty of people are happy with casual relationships, situationships, friends with benefits, or hooking up. When I say they're happy, usually one person is happy and the other person isn't. So, coming back to healthy relationships, I'm a
Yeah.
big proponent. Commit or don't commit.
You used a phrase that I really liked, and I know we've blown through almost 55 minutes. Dating after divorce, you said, can be empowering, and that that to me, I think is really correct, because a lot of times we will have our clients, who feel like they've lost everything. They
Yeah.
don't have this, they don't have that, and in a couple of years, as they build back, it's like, wow. I mean, now I'm doing things that I was never allowed to do before, never did
Yeah.
before, that whole thing. And that's why when I saw that divorcing, can be empowering, I thought that was pretty cool.
So, it's interesting because you and I are, I'm assuming you're a baby boomer,
Oh yeah,
whether you're a baby boomer or Gen X. We grew up with a script. Most of us grew up with the script of go to college, get a job, meet somebody, get married, buy a house, start a family. That was the script, that was the programming. And oftentimes, many of us fell into that programming without really knowing who we are and who's really right for us. We just followed the script. So now we go through a divorce, and it's an opportunity. Now, many of us probably have 10, 15, 20 years or more under our belt. It can be a very empowering space to be because of this life experience. The problem many people have is they're not really they're approaching it with old eyes, that those eyes that they had in the past, instead of being in a space of understanding where we're at in our society today and the way we operate today. And it can be empowering, or it can be equally as limiting if we have old, you know, belief systems in the way we operate going forward. And the one thing is, and I can only speak for myself, like after my divorce, I'm like, I'm going to become a kid again in a way. And what I mean is, I let go of all of the scripts and said, I'm going to live life on my terms, not the script that I grew up with.
I really like that. The is there This is a really crazy question. I don't know why it came in my head. Um, is there a time when you're just too old? It's like, if you get divorced when you're 70 or when you're 40, does that really make a difference in trying to
Well,
go
I
forward
would
and build
say,
another relationship?
to some degree, biologically speaking, the days in front of you, if you're 70, are much shorter than the days
Yeah.
behind you. People are still falling in love at senior citizen communities, and the Golden Bachelorette was on. There's a TV show called The Later Daters. Um, Certainly, it's not necessarily a death sentence as it once was years ago to be in your golden years and find someone. Um, is it a guarantee you're going to find someone? Absolutely not. But certainly, there are plenty of people meeting, even in their 80s, And it's happening for, I have a client who's 75 and she has 5 boyfriends. So,
Oh my God,
yeah.
I like it.
So
Well,
it's,
see,
yeah.
that makes you feel good. It's like, it's not over till it's over,
Um,
as Yogi Berra used to say. And that dates me.
yeah, yeah, it does.
Um, we're going to have to go pretty quick, but I just want to know that is there something that you would give, one of those one pieces of advice, if I just, if that, time to give you one piece of advice, don't make this mistake or something. Is there
Yeah.
something that you have that you just want people to absolutely understand?
Yeah, this is kind of the theme of what I coach because even though I help women try to attract their ideal relationship, I continually say this, and these aren't my words, this I'm parroting from others, is the most important relationship you're ever going to have is the relationship with yourself. It's the starting point for every healthy relationship, interpersonal relationship you have with people in your lives, whether it's family, friends, or even a romantic relationship, is really cultivate that relationship with yourself. The number one emotional health wound most human beings suffer with is I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, and I'm not likable. That's kind of the core emotional wound. And dating and relationships will trigger that stuff like nobody's business. So
Yeah,
when one invests in their own emotional growth, and what I say self love, it's like an antidote to suffering. It's an antidote to emotional chaos when one begins that journey of self loving themselves and then you become a magnetic attractor for what
yeah,
you want in life. And that's really my message to everybody is do the work on yourself. And if you're lucky, you attract a great partner along the way.
I love it. I love it. We are just about out of time, but I do want to ask you that if someone wants to get a hold of you, what are good ways that they can get a hold of
Sure. So my name is listed right here, Jonathon Aslay. You can just punch that into Google. I have a very popular YouTube channel where I produce videos on a daily basis. I certainly have a website that you can check out. I've got gazillion blogs out there. I've got Facebook and Instagram and all those places you can go follow me. But I would just say go to my YouTube channel, watch a couple videos. If it resonates with you, then reach out to me for coaching.
you? I love it. I love it. Well, I want to do this again. There's like 42 other questions I wanted to ask. Oh, thank you so much. That would be me. I would just be asking questions so much that if finally they would say, okay, I'm done.
Well, we can do a
But
10-hour segment, okay?
yeah. So thank you so much today for being here to talk about, giving tips to folks who just may be scared to date again as a divorcee.
Yeah.
It's just great to
I
hear
hope
that.
I can help.
You bet.
Thank you.
And everyone, thank you again for joining us today. And if anyone has any questions on today's topic, you can post it here. We can get you connected with Jonathon, or of course, you can contact him yourself. And until next time, stay